Joining me is Liberal Senator Hollie Hughes and former Labor Senator and Cabinet Minister Stephen Conroy, still a very influential figure in Labor. Watch what he says, because what he says sometimes happens in the party. Well, speaking of which, how can Daniel Andrews justify this spending?
Well, you know, you've got to admire his political skills, because in announcing this, he completely snookered the opposition, and they are supporting it. So he gets to get bipartisan support, he gets to save netball from its own debacles, and he gets to appeal directly to inner city votes to vote Labor against the Greens in places like Richmond, Northcote and Albert Park. So this is just a win-win-win for him. It just again demonstrates that he is the most superior politician in the state and as a state leader across the country.
You've put it brilliantly. It is a win-win-win for him. Hollie Hughes, how can we make this decision one that's a win for the taxpayers? Steve makes a great point. The Liberals are so weak in Victoria that they've gone along with it instead of opposing it in principle. But how could you justify this decision without saying it'll win him an election?
The chutzpah of Dan Andrews is really something to behold. It really is just extraordinary. You've got unprecedented ramping of ambulances, shortages across the state. You've got downturns in education standards after kids in Victoria were locked away for 2 years. Yet this is what he does less than a month out from an election. And it is welcomed with open arms. It's extraordinary to think that the Victorian budget is in the state that it is. Now, is it New South Wales, Tasmania and Queensland that their debt combined is still going to be less than Victoria's debt after this latest budget statement? It's like $166 billion the state of Victoria is going to be in debt. Yet somehow or other, another $15 million for netball just waved on through. It really is something to behold.
Yep. If it wins him an election, taxpayers' money is his money. Talking about spending, Steve, the Albanese government's budget didn't cut it with the voters. News poll said just 28% said they'd be better off from it. But the vote for both Labor and the Liberals went up in this news poll. It went up. And the vote for the Teal independents, meanwhile, these global warming independents, you know, we're going to change the world and blah, blah, that went right down. What's your overall read from this poll?
Look, this isn't really a budget, firstly. Secondly, it didn't set out to try and throw cash out the door, cheap one-off payments, to, you know, reduce the cost of living. That was tried before the last election by the Liberal Party. The punters aren't buying that sort of, here's $400 or here's $800. What they want to see is the policy framework that will lead to a reduction in prices. They want to see something that will take the pressure off, petrol prices. But you know, the government tried the big one. Here, we'll give you 6 months free. The punters just went, well, no, thank you. That's an election con. We're not interested. So Labor's strategy was not to do that. Labor's strategy was to say, this is going to be a very tough 12 months, very tough 18 months. We are going to not try and insult your intelligence. We are going to tackle the long-term problems. So I don't think a budget, a poll that says
long-term. Read the budget papers. Well, the deficit will be $50 billion still in 3 years, still in 4 years. It doesn't tackle that at all. But
Andrew,
right,
you can't ignore what the forecasts were under the Liberal government. The punters are
giving them time. Well, the punters are giving them time.
Andrews. Sorry, Andrew, I just said Dan Andrews, the chutzpah of him. Stephen, you've just tried to outdo him with that. It wasn't really a budget. You want to see a copy of what it said on the front of the papers delivered to all our offices? It was budget papers. It's a budget, and on Friday I spent in budget estimates. So I'm pretty sure they did treat it as a budget. It's been very poorly received. and I'm going to have to go back and check the figures, but I think it's around a third, if not higher, have said this budget is going to do nothing to address cost of living pressures. The electorate has not seen this as a budget that is going to take off cost of living pressures for them. And in fact, they know they're staring down the barrel of another 0.25 or 0.5 interest rate rise from the Reserve Bank tomorrow. So it's been very badly received. And the thing that I am still trying to find, it was hyped as some sort of wellness budget. Now, I did think that was going to include yoga retreats or something around those lines, but no one seems to be able to find any allusion to that now, because it's certainly not giving any wellness for the Australian population.
Stephen, look, I accept what you say. The government's thinking this wasn't the real budget, right? This wasn't, we're going to do one in, but by the time it gets around to the so-called real budget in May, but this was a budget, it is a budget, but if you accept that, by the time they get around to the real budget with the hard decisions, a whole year of government, of a 3-year term, was already behind them. I think they've missed their opportunity to make a good impression in the first.
Well, I think they made a decision not to go for short-term populism. I think they decided that they would have to establish credibility going forward. They didn't go for short-term populism. Short-term populism is, here's 50% off your petrol fuel exercise. That's the definition of cheap populism, when they're going to take it away after 6 months.
It's a budget for families, it's a budget for women, apparently.
Not to do that.
Well, that's true. No, Hollie, I'm sorry I'm out of time, but the cheap populism was in that free childcare, even childcare handouts, even for couples on $530,000 a year. I mean, how about that populism?
Extraordinary.
Steve Conroy, Hollie Hughes. No, yeah, exactly right. Got to go. I'm sorry to cut you short there, Hollie. Have you back next time for a little more. Thank you so much for your time. But back